The USN Culinary Explorer drifted in high Earth orbit, its polished silver hull reflecting the blue-green marble below. Chef Marco Vasquez wiped his hands on his apron, the scent of roasted garlic and saffron clinging to his sleeves. The ship's kitchen hummed around him, a symphony of simmering stocks, hissing steam, and the quiet chatter of his sous chefs. Marco, the last batch of fermentation cultures is stabilized. Dr. Elena Petrov called from the lab annex. Her fingers danced over a holographic display, monitoring the delicate balance of microbes. If we can scale this up, we could revolutionize off-world cuisine. Marco grinned, tossing a pinch of salt into a bubbling pot. Tell that to the Galactic Federation. They still think our food is primitive biological experimentation. A klaxon blared. Red lights strobed across the ceiling. The ship shuddered. A tray of freshly rolled pasta slid off the counter, splattering against the floor. What the hell? Marco grabbed the nearest counter as gravity fluctuated. The viewport darkened, not with the void of space, but with the obsidian bulk of a Zapirian dreadnought eclipsing the sun. Unidentified vessel, a voice crackled over the comms, smooth and synthetic. This is High Archivist Vex'lith of the Zapirian Empire. You will surrender your culinary databases immediately. Marco's blood ran cold. The Zapirians, a species so advanced they viewed other civilizations as curiosities to be catalogued and discarded. Elena's voice was tight. They're jamming our comms. Earth Command can't hear us. The ship groaned as tractor beams locked on. Metal screamed. Marco stumbled into the hallway just in time to see the main airlock detach with a sickening crunch. Drones poured in, not military models, sleek, silver things with delicate manipulator arms, like surgeons' tools given sentience. They ignored the humans, beelining for the kitchen. Marco lunged for the nearest drone. Hey, those are... A pulse of energy knocked him back. His spine hit the wall, breath exploding from his lungs. High Archivist Vex'lith stepped through the ruined airlock, her chitinous limbs clicking against the deck. 4 eyes, each a different color, scanned the room with detached interest. Ah, the human chef. You can't just... We can. A hulking Vorak flanked her, his armored plates glistening with oily secretions, overseer cracks. His voice was a graveled snarl. Your species has no concept of what you've hoarded here. The drones worked with terrifying efficiency, spice racks emptied into sterile containers. Recipe databanks were sliced from the walls. Even the handwritten notebooks generations of family recipes were plucked from drawers and scanned. Marco watched, helpless, as a drone dismantled his grandmother's sourdough starter. 200 years of careful cultivation, gone in seconds. You're making a mistake, he said, voice raw. Vex'lith tilted her head. Mistake, no. Your food is fascinating. A primitive art form, yes, but one we will refine. She gestured to a drone extracting a vial of Carolina Reaper extract. Imagine this, amplified, weaponized. The Vorak legions will feast on your pain as they crush your worlds. Cracks chuckled, a wet, guttural sound. We will teach you the meaning of flavor, soft one. The last drone departed. The kitchen stood barren, every ingredient, every tool, every scrap of knowledge stripped away. Vex'lith paused at the airlock. Do not resist. The Empire has claimed your greatest treasure. Be grateful we left you your lives. The airlock sealed behind them. Silence. Elena sagged against a counter, her face ashen. They took everything. Every recipe, every culture. Even the Marco stared at the empty space where his knives had hung. Then he laughed. A low, dark sound. Elena blinked. You're laughing. He wiped his eyes. They have no idea what they just took. Outside, the Zapirian dreadnought shimmered, preparing to jump. Marco watched it go, his smile sharp as a chef's blade. "Human food isn't just ingredients and instructions," he murmured. "It's history, it's patience, it's knowing when to stir and when to let things burn." The stars swallowed the ship. Marco cracked his knuckles. "Let's see how they like their empire." "Well done." The grand hall of Emperor Zorath shimmered like a fractured diamond, its crystalline spires refracting light into cascades of color that danced across the banquet tables. 1,000 Zapirian nobles crowded the space, their chitinous limbs clicking in anticipation as servitor drones carried platter after platter of stolen human delicacies. The air smelled of seared meat, melted chocolate, and something far more dangerous, arrogance. At the head table, Emperor Zorath lounged on his biothrone, his segmented fingers drumming against an armrest grown from living bone. Beside him, Grand Chef Nixlan adjusted his ceremonial apron, stitched from the silk of conquered worlds, and bowed. The first course, magnificence. Earth's roast duck, as promised. Zorath's mandibles twitched. "You removed the weaknesses." Nixlan's antennae flicked with pride. "Of course, the human recipe called for balance, a crime against progress. I tripled the fat content and infused it with stimulant syrup." He gestured to a hovering hologram displaying Earth's orbital farms, burning under Zapirian bombardment. "A fitting tribute to our victory." The first bite sent a tremor through Zorath's exoskeleton. His secondary heart stuttered, then hammered faster. This is power." Across the hall, Vorak warlord Grax shoved aside his nutrient paste dispenser, standard military issue for the Empire's shock troops, and grabbed a dripping rack of ribs slathered in something called Carolina Reaper glaze. His four eyes narrowed at the warning label, "Caution, extremely spicy." Then he tore into it with a snarl. His first mistake, Grax's respiratory vents snapped open as the heat hit, his armored skin flushing crimson. His second, in command, a wiry Vorak named Verk, hesitated. "Commander, your veins are..." "Silence." Grax coughed, reaching for another rib. "This is warfare now." By the third course, the hall had descended into chaos. Zapirian aristocrats slurped bowls of ramen broth, laced with neurostimulants, their antennae vibrating. A minister collapsed mid-bite into a modified chocolate souffle, now face synthetic sugar, her carapace cracking from osmotic shock. No one noticed. Nixlan watched from the kitchen gallery, his claws adjusting the feed of a stolen human culinary database. "Pathetic," he muttered to his assistant, a young Zapirian scribe trembling under the weight of a spice grinder. "They cling to restraint like cowards. We have perfected their craft." On screen, Marco Vasquez's face flickered in a captured transmission, his last words before the Empire took him. "Food isn't just fuel, it's history, it's care." Nixlan deleted the file. Back in the hall, Grax was on his 12th rib, his body shuddering with each bite. Verk grabbed his arm. "Commander, your liver is..." Grax backhanded him across the room. "I fought in 12 systems. You think some human source can..." He gagged, suddenly his primary heart stuttering. The ribs clattered to the floor. Zorath barely glanced up from his 7th duck carcass. "Remove that weakness." Servitor drones dragged Grax away, his talons scraping grooves in the crystal floor. Verk stared at the abandoned ribs, then at the feasting nobles. For the first time in his life, the Vorak felt something alien doubt. In the shadows, a Zapirian sous chef named Crix watched it all unfold. His claws tightened around a stolen data chip, one head smuggled out of Marco's kitchen before the raid. On it, a single recipe labeled Grandma's Chicken Soup. The instructions included words like, "Simmer gently," and "Skim the fat." Nixlan's voice crackled over the kitchen comms. Course 8. Imperial Turbo garlic bread, infused with adrenaline analogues. Crix looked down at the chip, then at the feasting hall, where a duke was now convulsing from chocolate overdose. His mandibles clicked softly. What have we done? The airlock hissed shut behind Marco as he collapsed against the rusted interior of the asteroid base. His hands still shook from the escape pod's violent landing. The stolen Zapirian data chip burned in his pocket, every human recipe ever recorded, compressed into a sliver of alien crystal. "You're late," a voice said. Elena Petrov stepped from the shadows, her lab coat streaked with grease. The biochemist had turned the abandoned mining station into a makeshift lab, her equipment jury rigged from scavenged Zapirian tech. A fermentation vat bubbled ominously in the corner. "They took everything," Marco gasped. "Every recipe, every cultural database, even my grandmother's fucking paella notes." Elena didn't flinch. "And you brought them dessert." She snatched the chip from his trembling fingers and slotted it into a cracked terminal. Schematics for molecular distillers and enzyme disruptors flickered to life. A clatter echoed from the corridor. Marco spun, heart hammering. But it wasn't Imperial enforcers. As Zapirian staggered into the light, his exoskeleton dull with exhaustion. Crix, the Sioux chef, who'd smuggled Marco out, his upper hands clutched a leaking nutrient pack. "You're insane," Crix hissed, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "The Emperor's taste. Testers are dying, that last batch of Sichuan peppercorns." "Good," Elena interrupted. She tapped the screen where a Vorak warlord's autopsy report flashed. "Their gut flora can't handle capsaicin long term. We just need to accelerate the process." Marco pushed off the wall and limped toward the station's gutted kitchen module. Alien drones had stripped it bare, but someone had left the gas lines intact. He twisted a valve, and blue flame roared to life under a dented wok. "Give me that." He grabbed a moldy satchel from Crix, the last of the stolen Imperial rations. The nutrient bricks smelled like wet cardboard. Marco crushed them into powder, then reached for Elena's latest experiment, a vial of genetically modified koji mold. Crix's antennae twitched. "What are you? Teaching you what real umami tastes like?" Marco sprinkled the mold over the powder, then deglazed the wok with stolen Zapirian ethanol. The mixture bubbled, releasing a scent that made even Elena pause. Crix recoiled. "That's not food. That's a weapon." Marco bared his teeth. "Exactly." The terminal beeped. Elena zoomed in on a rotating DNA strand, Zapirian digestive enzymes, highlighted in sickly green. Their metabolism relies on crystalline amino chains. Human fermentation breaks those chains. Feed them enough miso, and their exoskeletons dissolve from the inside. A tremor ran through the station. Distant klaxons wailed as Imperial scanners swept the asteroid belt. Crix's middle hands clenched. "They'll glass this rock if they find us. Then we hit first." Marco dumped the contents of the wok into a bioreactor. The mixture pulsed with unnatural light. "Elena, how fast can you scale this up?" The biochemist was already rewiring a stolen Zapirian replicator. With their own nutrient synthesizers, 12 hours to cripple a battleship's crew. She jerked her chin at Crix. "If he helps." The Zapirian hesitated. His compound eyes flicked to Marco's makeshift kitchen, then to the bubbling vat of lethal koji. "You're asking me to betray my species." Marco shoved a steaming spoon toward Crix's mandibles. "No, I'm asking you to taste." The aroma hit Crix first, caramelized onion, smoked paprika, the deep earthiness of fermented soy. His antennae quivered. Against all instinct, he accepted the bite. The flavor exploded across his chemoreceptors. His exoskeleton paled from emerald to sickly yellow as his digestive tract shivered. For the first time in his life, Crix experienced balance. The interplay of salt, fat, acid, heat that human chefs took for granted. He dropped to his knees. "What?" Crix's voice cracked. "What have we done?" Marco crouched beside him. "You took our recipes and turned them into poison. But this," he tapped the spoon against the wok, "this is what food's supposed to be." Outside, the klaxons grew louder. Elena slammed a fist on the reactor's ignition switch. The machine whined to life, pumping out barrels of bioengineered nightmare fuel. 12 hours, she repeated. Her grin was all teeth. Then we serve the Empire its last meal. Crick stared at his shaking hands. Hands that had butchered Earth's culinary heritage into grotesque imperial banquets. Slowly he reached for a knife. "Show me," he said, "how to cook properly." Marco tossed him an apron. The station shook again as Zapirian patrol ships breached the asteroid's exosphere. Somewhere in the dark, a yeast bomb primed itself. The kitchen at last was ready for war. The imperial throne room reeked of spoiled delicacies. Emperor Zorath lounged on his bioluminescent dais, his carapace streaked with unnatural crimson hues from weeks of sugar overload. Around him, half-eaten platters of mutated human dishes floated on anti-grav trays. Chocolate-covered steaks dripping with neon sauce, ghost pepper custard that bubbled ominously. Marco's face flickered to life on the central holo display. Transmitted from some hidden asteroid kitchen, his once white chef's coat was stained with Zapirian engine grease, his beard unkempt, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. "Your Majesty," Marco said, bowing just deep enough to mock, "I bring a gift, the final human recipe." Zorath's mandibles twitched. His digestive sac had swollen to twice its normal size, pressing against his ceremonial armor. "More tricks, softkin. Your fermentation bombs ruined 3 of my dreadnoughts." "Not this one." Marco held up a crystalline data chip. A dessert, harmless, victory in every bite. Grand Chef Nix's Lun scurried forward, his appendages trembling. Since stealing Earth's recipes, he'd replaced all 4 of his taste glands with Vorak implants. "Let me examine it, my Emperor." The human lies. Silence. Zorath snatched the chip. His claws left cracks in the crystal. "You swore you could master their cuisine, yet my fleet vomits acid in 0 gravity." Nix's Lun cowered. Across the hall, Vorak warlords groaned on their feasting couches. One clutched his thorax, his exoskeleton splitting from salt overdose. Marco's hologram smiled. "The problem isn't the recipes, it is you." Humans spent millennia learning balance, sweet with bitter, heat with cool. He gestured at the mutated feast. This is gluttony." Zorath inserted the chip into his throne's console. A holographic recipe unfolded: tres leches cake. With one modification, xanthan gum increased to fey human tolerance. Nix's Lun's antennae stiffened. "A trap. Xanthan gum is toxic to weaklings," Zorath snapped. "My biochemists modified our enzymes. We are perfected." He turned to Marco. "When I finish this, I will personally peel your flesh for appetizers." Marco crossed his arms. "Bon appetit." Imperial drones whirred to life, synthesizing the dessert in seconds. The cake emerged from the molecular assembler, a towering monstrosity soaked in condensed milk, its surface shimmering with unstable sugars. The scent made nearby Vorak warriors whimper with craving. Zorath seized the largest slice. His mandibles quivered as he inhaled the aroma. "Pathetic you think this child's treat can." He took a bite. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then his primary heart stuttered. Nix's Lun gasped. "My Emperor." Zorath dropped the cake. His carapace began cracking along old battle scars, oozing green hemolymph. The xanthan gum harmless to humans. Human food requires respect. You took our heritage and made it weapons, so we weaponized it back. The Emperor collapsed onto his throne. His secondary hearts pumped frantically, trying to flush the toxin. Vorak warlords stumbled back as his limbs locked in metabolic shock. "Your fleet," Zorath choked out. Already tasting their last meals, Marco said. Your dreadnought's reactors are fermenting. Crew decks smell like rotten kimchi. Nixlun lunged at the hologram. Reverse it. You owe us. Marco laughed. Oh, you stole, you perverted now. He nodded at Zorath, whose eyes were dimming. Now you learn. The Emperor's last breath hissed through his spiracles, his final words barely audible. This is victory. Then his carapace split open with a wet crack. Silence. Nix's lungs stared at the corpse, then at the remaining cake, then at the Vorak warlords, who were now eyeing him with sudden hunger. Marco's transmission cut off with static. In the darkness of his hidden kitchen, he turned to Elena and Crix. Phase 2 broadcast the antidote recipe to every ship except the Imperial flagships. Crix trembled. They'll riot, they'll eat each other. Marco stirred a pot of simmering broth, the real recipe. Then they should have cooked better. The Vorak warlord Grak staggered through the corridors of his flagship, clutching his swollen abdomen. His once imposing carapace had turned a sickly yellow, cracked in places where his body had rejected the last feast. Around him, warriors slumped against walls or curled into fetal positions, their digestive sacs distended from weeks of improperly prepared human food. The air reeked of bile and fermented spices. Report. Grak snarled at his bridge crew, though the word came out as a wheeze. His second, in command, Ver, barely lifted his head from the navigation console. 37 more ships have gone offline. Warlord, their crews are incapacitated. A holographic display flickered, showing the once mighty Vorak armada now adrift in high orbit over Zapirian Prime. Grak smashed a fist into the console. The Zapirians did this. Their arrogance poisoned us. His mandibles quivered as another wave of pain shot through him. Memories of the Emperor's last banquet flashed in his mind. Mountains of oversalted meats, lakes of syrupy desserts, all consumed in gluttonous frenzy. On the view screen, the Zapirian homeworld burned, not from weapons fire, but from thousands of uncontrolled kitchen fires where desperate populations tried replicating human dishes. Their orbital farms had collapsed when Marco's yeast bombs mutated their crops into inedible sludge. A communication alert chimed. Grax hesitated, then activated the feed. Marco Vasquez's face appeared, standing aboard a sleek human vessel. Behind him, Elena Petrov monitored scrolling biochemical data. Warlord Grax, Marco said, his voice calm. I'm transmitting a list of safe foods for your species. Basic nutrition. Nothing fancy, but it'll stop the dying. Grax's claws dug into the armrests. You mock us, human. This was your plan all along. Marco shook his head. No, we offered our food in peace. Your empire stole it, corrupted it. He leaned closer. You're suffering from culinary shock. Your bodies weren't meant for pure capsaicin or refined sucrose in those quantities. Ver groaned, clutching his stomach. Warlord, the troops. We can't even stand, let alone fight. Grax watched as another ship on the display went dark. His mighty fleet, conquerors of 100 worlds, reduced to this. The shame burned worse than the indigestion. Then the smell hit him. It drifted through the ventilation system. Warm, yeasty, impossibly comforting. His antennae twitched involuntarily. What is that? On screen, Marco held up a simple loaf. Sourdough made the proper way, slow fermentation, balanced acidity. He broke off a piece. The crust crackled perfectly. Grax's mouth flooded with saliva. An instinct deeper than pride took over. How much for that? Elena stepped forward, tapping a datapad. Surrender your remaining ships. Submit to Galactic food safety regulations. Then we'll talk about rations. Around Grax, his warriors perked up at the aroma. One young soldier actually whimpered. "You'd let us starve," Grax rasped. Marco's expression hardened. "You let billions starve when you looted our agricultural worlds. But we're not like you." He placed the bread in a small delivery pod. "This is a sample. Proof we can help. The choice is yours." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge. Then Verse spoke, voice trembling. "Warlord, I can't take another day of this pain." Grax stared at the pod now entering their hangar bay. His entire body ached for it. The great Vorak conqueror, brought low by a loaf of bread. He made his decision. "Open a channel to all ships," he growled. Then, shoulders slumping. "Prepare to accept humanitarian aid." As the first morsel touched his tongue, Grax experienced something alien. The flavors unfolded in layers subtle and complex, nothing like the crude slabs of sugared meat the Empire had fed them. This was art. This was war, and humanity had won. The orbital kitchen hummed with activity, its polished steel surfaces reflecting the light of a dozen different suns. Marco wiped his hands on his apron, watching as the queue stretched all the way to the docking bay. Zapirians, Vorak, even a few Cerelians, all waiting patiently for their turn at the counter. Crix adjusted his chef's hat, his exoskeleton still bearing faint stress marks from the withdrawal. "Never thought I'd see the day," he muttered, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. The mighty Empire brought to its knees by a souffle. Marco grinned, sprinkling cinnamon over a fresh batch of churros. "Told you they had no idea what they were stealing." A Zapirian noblewoman approached the counter, her carapace still showing signs of sugar rash. She bowed her head. "Chef Vasquez, the council has approved your proposal. Earth's culinary knowledge will be protected under galactic heritage law." Elena emerged from the back, her arms full of datapads. "That means no more recipe theft. Any species wants to learn human cooking. They enroll in the academy properly." The noblewoman hesitated. "And the relief shipments?" Marco slid a plate of steaming dumplings across the counter. "First lesson, you don't get the good stuff until you prove you can handle it." Crix handed her a small vial. "Digestive enzymes, take one before every meal. And for the love of the stars, don't deep fry everything this time." Outside, the viewports showed a fleet of surrendered Zapirian dreadnoughts, their once gleaming hulls now repainted with the sigil of the new Galactic Culinary Accord. Vorak warlords sat awkwardly at communal tables, their massive claws carefully gripping tiny espresso cups. Grax lumbered up to the counter, his once ferocious frame now slightly softer around the edges. "Vasquez," he rumbled. "The bread, the real bread you promised?" Marco pulled a fresh baguette from the oven, the crust crackling audibly. He broke off a piece and handed it over. "Slowly savor it." The Vorak warlord closed his eyes as he chewed, his battle-scarred face softening. This is what they ruined. Elena tapped a datapad. "Biochemical analysis is complete. Your people can process human food in moderation, but your chefs need training. No more dumping a kilo of salt into every dish." A group of young Zapirians crowded around a holoscreen, watching a tutorial on proper knife skills. One turned to Marco. "Your techniques are inefficient. Our appendages can chop faster." Marco tossed him a potato. "Show me." The Zapirian's blades flashed and produced a pile of uneven chunks. Marco picked one up. Speed means nothing without control. "Try again." Crix chuckled, plating a delicate crepe. "Took me 3 weeks to stop shredding everything. Humans may be soft, but their patience terrifying." The kitchen doors slid open, revealing Professor Zixel, her tentacles wrapped around a stack of textbooks. "Chef Vasquez, the Academy has approved your curriculum. Well, begin with basic food safety. Marco groaned. You're telling me an empire that built Dyson spheres didn't figure out cross-contamination? Zixel's orbs pulsed with amusement. They considered illness a sign of weakness. Now they're learning humility. A commotion erupted near the dessert station. A Vorak was licking crumbs off the floor, his pupils dilated. Crick sighed, grabbing a mop. Addiction counseling starts tomorrow. By sunset, the kitchen had served over 2,000 meals. Marco collapsed onto a stool, his arms aching. Elena handed him a coffee. They'll be back tomorrow. And the day after, you realize we've created a permanent demand, right? Marco sipped the coffee, watching as a Zapirian child tentatively tried a chocolate chip cookie. Her carapace flushed with delight. Good. Let them learn the right way. Crix hung up his apron, his mandibles clicking softly. You could have let them starve after what they did to Earth. Marco stood, stretching. Food's not a weapon. Not really. It's a bridge. He tossed Crix a loaf of sourdough. Next time, just ask for the recipe.